Nora retired to Earth, to the world where her journey had begun. She spent her final decades writing, documenting everything she had learned about the Builder language and culture. Her memoirs became required reading in schools across the galaxy, teaching young people about the power of communication and the importance of using knowledge responsibly. On the day she died, peaceful and surrounded by friends from a dozen different species, every guardian sphere in the galaxy went dark for exactly 1 minute. A moment of silence from ancient machines, honoring the woman who had given voice to their message and meaning to their long wait. And then the lights came back on, and the work continued, as it always would. New speakers were teaching new students. New discoveries were being made. New species were joining the great project of building a civilization worthy of the Builder's trust. The legacy lived on, not in any one person, but in the connections between minds, the bridges of understanding that spanned the distances between stars and the gaps between different ways of thinking. Nora Finch had been a linguist who loved old books and dead languages. She had become the speaker who awakened an ancient legacy. But in the end, she had been something more important than either of those things. She had been a teacher. And the lessons she taught would echo through the galaxy for millennia to come. She thought about Ambassador Dahl, Admiral Vorin, Dr. Cross, and all the others who had supported her on this journey. They were mortal. They would age and die while she remained, an immortal witness to generations of change. But she also thought about the futures she had been shown, the choice between cooperation and conflict, light and darkness. Everything she had worked for hung in the balance, and having someone to guide the younger species through the difficult centuries ahead could make the difference. Nora took a deep breath that she did not really have in this place of pure consciousness, and made her decision. I'll remain as I am, human, mortal. She felt the Builder presence react with surprise, and she hurried to explain. Not because the transformation isn't tempting, it is, but because I think the galaxy needs to learn to stand on its own. If I become this immortal guardian, species will rely on me instead of developing their own wisdom. They'll defer to my judgment instead of learning to make hard choices themselves. She felt the weight of her choice settle into place. The Builders left because they realized their presence was preventing younger species from growing. If I accept your transformation, I'll make the same mistake. The galaxy needs to learn to walk without someone holding its hand. The Builder presence radiated what felt like profound respect. Few had ever refused such an offer. Fewer still for such selfless reasons. Nora had proven herself worthy not just of accessing the Builder legacy, but of truly understanding its purpose. The transformation offer was withdrawn, replaced by something else. A gift. The Central Guardian would grant Nora an extension of her natural lifespan, not immortality, but enough extra years to see her students fully trained and ready to carry on her work. Perhaps 200 years total, enough time to make a real difference without becoming a permanent fixture. Nora accepted gratefully. The light surrounding her began to fade, and she felt herself returning to physical reality. The Central Guardian still towered above her, but now she could see it differently. Not as a machine or even a repository of knowledge, but as a memorial. A reminder of a civilization that had achieved greatness and made terrible mistakes, and wanted to help others avoid the same fate. She placed her hand on the sphere's surface and spoke her final words in this place. Thank you for trusting us. Thank you for believing we could do better. I promise we'll try. The sphere pulsed once in acknowledgement, and then Nora was walking back to the Builder ship, ready to return to the galaxy and continue her work. When she emerged from the galactic core 3 weeks later, she found messages waiting from dozens of star systems. The Guardian network had begun operating independently, granting knowledge to those who proved worthy and denying it to those who approached with selfish intentions. The system was working exactly as the Builders had intended, but there were also messages of concern. A coalition of rejected species was forming, angry at being denied access to Builder technology. They claimed the Guardians were biased, that the trials were unfair. Some threatened violence against Guardians or against those who had been granted access. Nora sighed. The work was far from over. Probably would never be over. Every generation would have to relearn the lessons of the past, would have to choose cooperation over conflict, wisdom over power. But they would have help. They would have the Guardian network, offering knowledge to those ready to receive it. They would have teachers, dozens of new speakers who were learning the builder language and spreading it across the galaxy. And they would have each other, hundreds of species with different perspectives and experiences, all working toward a common goal. 20 years later, Nora stood before a new class of students in the Academy of Speakers, an institution built specifically to teach the builder language and philosophy. The students came from 40 different species, their forms ranging from crystalline to insectoid to beings of pure energy. They looked at her with a mixture of awe and nervousness. "You're here because you want to learn to speak with the Guardians," Nora began, her voice carrying easily through the chamber. "But I want you to understand something important. Learning the builder language is not about gaining power or accessing advanced technology. It's about learning to truly communicate, to understand perspectives so different from your own that they challenge everything you thought you knew." She gestured to the Guardian sphere floating at the front of the room, one of many that now served as teaching aids. The builders left us more than just technology. They left us a challenge, to be better than they were, to build a civilization based not on domination but on cooperation, not on hoarding knowledge but on sharing it freely. An insectoid student raised one of their forearms. "Teacher Nora, is it true that you've spoken with the builders themselves? That they're still alive in some form?" Nora smiled. "Yes. They transcended physical existence, but they still watch over us, and they're proud of what we're building. But they also warn us that the hardest work is still ahead." "What work?" another student asked. "Learning to trust each other, learning to work together despite our differences, learning to use knowledge responsibly even when it would be easier to use it selfishly." Nora looked at each student in turn. "That's the real trial the builders left us. Not whether we can unlock their technology, but whether we can become the kind of species worthy of having it." The class continued, and Nora felt the same satisfaction she always did when teaching. This was her purpose, not to be a gatekeeper or a guardian, but a teacher, someone who helped others find their own path to understanding. After the class ended, Dr. Cross found her in her office reviewing applications from prospective students. The crystalline scholar had aged in the 2 decades since their first meeting, his surface now covered in the fine cracks that marked a luminar approaching their final years. "I wanted to thank you," he said simply. "My people are alive because of you, because you unlocked the medical knowledge that cured our plague. I just opened the door, Halvin. Your people did the work." "Even so." Cross settled into a chair that had been specially designed for his form. "I have been thinking about legacy, about what we leave behind when we're gone. The builders left knowledge. What will we leave?" Nora considered the question. "I think we'll leave the example of cooperation, the proof that different species can work together, can learn from each other, can build something greater than any one civilization could achieve alone. That's what the builders wanted, not for us to worship them or try to recreate what they built, but to create something new, something uniquely ours. And you believe we can do that?" "I have to believe it, because the alternative is too dark to contemplate." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching through the window as ships from 100 different worlds came and went from the Academy station. The galaxy was changing, growing, learning, not without struggle or setbacks, but moving forward nonetheless. 50 years after that conversation, on the day Nora finally retired from active teaching, every guardian sphere in the galaxy performed an action they had never done before. In perfect synchronization, they all tilted slightly forward, their surfaces glowing bright with symbols that translated to a simple phrase. "We acknowledge the speaker. We honor the teacher. We thank the bridge between past and future." It was a salute, given by the remnants of the most advanced civilization in galactic history, to a human linguist who had simply tried to preserve knowledge and help people understand each other. Nora, now elderly but still sharp of mind thanks to the builder's gift, stood in the grand chamber of the Academy and watched the Guardians bow. Around her, students and colleagues from across the galaxy stood in respectful silence, witnesses to a moment that would be recorded in every history book for generations to come. When the salute ended and the Guardians returned to their neutral positions, Nora spoke one final time in the builder language, her voice carrying through the chamber and through the network that connected all the spheres across the galaxy. "Thank you for trusting us with tomorrow. We will honor your legacy by building something worthy of it, not by imitating you, but by learning from your mistakes and your triumphs, not by seeking to equal what you achieved, but by forging our own path. You gave us knowledge. We will give the future wisdom. The Guardians pulsed with light, accepting her words and her promise, and across the galaxy, on thousands of worlds, species that had been enemies were learning to work together. Problems that had seemed unsolvable were being addressed with builder knowledge and cooperative effort. The dream of the Builders, a civilization based on shared understanding and mutual respect, was slowly becoming reality. It would take generations more work. There would be setbacks and failures. Some species would fall back into old patterns of conflict and competition. But the foundation had been laid, and the network of Guardians stood ready to support those who sought knowledge for the right reasons. Nora retired to Earth, to the world where her journey had begun. She spent her final decades writing, documenting everything she had learned about the Builder language and culture. Her memoirs became required reading in schools across the galaxy, teaching young people about the power of communication and the importance of using knowledge. The dust never settled properly on Ashara Thorf. Nora Finch watched the red particles swirl through the air of the repository's entrance hall, dancing in the light from 3 different suns. She had traveled 8 months to reach this place, crossing half the galaxy to study languages that had been dead for thousands of years. The building before her was older than human civilization itself. Ryloth waited by the massive doors, all 4 of his arms folded across his chitinous chest. The Asheron curator had the patience of stone, and the disposition of someone who had seen too many eager researchers come and go. His compound eyes reflected Nora in 1,000 tiny fragments. "You understand the rules, human?" His voice clicked and buzzed through the translator device on his collar. No touching. No scanning. No attempts at activation. Nora adjusted the strap of her equipment bag. "I'm a linguist, not an engineer. I just want to look at the symbols." "They all say that." Ryloth turned and pushed open the doors with 2 hands while the other 2 worked the security panel. "Then they get curious. Then they get dead." The repository stretched before them like a cathedral built for giants. Shelves rose 50 meters high, each one holding artifacts from civilizations that had risen and fallen before humans had learned to make fire. Nora had spent 3 years just getting permission to enter this building. Another 2 years waiting for approval to access the deeper vaults. Dr. Halvin Cross floated beside her, his crystalline body refracting the ambient light into rainbow patterns on the floor. The Luminar scholar had been studying the repository for decades. "Your request was quite specific, Dr. Finch, Vault 12. Most researchers avoid that section entirely." "Because of the deaths?" Nora kept her voice steady. 3 researchers in the last century, 2 Luminari, 1 Kethian, all experienced scientists. Cross's internal lights dimmed slightly. "The artifact in Vault 12 does not welcome visitors." They descended through levels of increasing security. Each door required authorization from multiple species governments. Each corridor grew quieter as they moved deeper into the mountain that housed the repository. Nora's footsteps echoed against stone that predated her entire species. "The Builders," she said as they walked. "Everything I've read suggests they disappeared 50,000 years ago. No wars, no plague. They just left, vanished," Cross corrected. "We find their structures on hundreds of worlds. Always empty, always perfect, always impossible to activate." His crystalline form pulsed thoughtfully. "Some believe they ascended to a higher plane of existence. Others think they simply died out. But their technology remains. Yes, and it kills anyone who tries too hard to understand it." Vault 12's door was different from the others. While previous barriers had been metal and force fields, this one was simple stone carved with flowing symbols that seemed to move when Nora looked at them directly. Ryloth placed 1 hand on the surface and the stone dissolved like morning mist. Beyond lay a circular chamber. In its center floated a sphere of pure black material, 3 meters across, suspended in the air with no visible support. Symbols flowed across its surface like water, appearing and disappearing in patterns that made Nora's eyes hurt if she watched too long. "Beautiful," she whispered. "Deadly," Ryloth countered. "Do not approach closer than 5 meters. Do not attempt communication. Do not—" Yes, I understand." Nora was already unpacking her equipment, cameras, recording devices, analysis software that could break down visual patterns into mathematical structures. Cross drifted closer to the sphere, though he maintained the safe distance. What makes you think this is linguistic in nature? Previous researchers believed it to be a weapon or a power source. Nora set up her first camera, angling it to capture the sphere's surface. Because weapons don't need to communicate, power sources don't need grammar. Ryloth's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. You see grammar in that? I see structure. Repetition with variation, patterns that build on each other. Nora activated her recording equipment and began documenting the symbols. Every language in the galaxy follows certain rules. The sounds or symbols we use might differ, but the way we build meaning is similar. Subject, action, object, cause and effect, time and sequence. She worked for 6 hours straight, documenting every symbol that appeared on the sphere's surface. Cross and Ryloth eventually left her alone, confident that she would obey the safety restrictions. Nora barely noticed their departure. She was lost in the flow of shapes and patterns. The symbols were not random. She could see that much immediately. They appeared in clusters with certain shapes always preceding or following others, like words in a sentence, like letters in a word. The more she watched, the more convinced she became. This was not a machine. This was a message. By the time Ryloth returned to escort her out, Nora had filled 3 data drives with recordings. Her eyes burned from staring at the shifting symbols. Her back ached from hunching over her equipment. But her mind was racing with possibilities. Find anything useful? Ryloth asked as they climbed back toward the surface. Maybe. Nora clutched her equipment bag close. I need time to analyze the patterns. Compare them to known linguistic databases. You have 3 weeks before your permit expires, the curator reminded her. Then you must leave Asharada 4. 3 weeks. It would have to be enough. Nora spent the first week in her assigned quarters, a small room carved into the repository's outer wall. She ran the recordings through every linguistic analysis program she had brought. She compared the builder symbols to every known written language in the galactic database. Ancient Earth cuneiform, luminar light patterns, Kethian scent markings, the mathematical language of the mechanical autos. Nothing matched perfectly, but there were similarities. Tantalizing echoes of structure. The symbols used repetition. They built complexity from simple components. They had what linguists called recursion, the ability to nest meanings within meanings. All signs of true language, but language required sound. These were visual symbols. How had the builders spoken them? In her second week, Nora made a breakthrough. She noticed that certain symbols appeared more frequently than others, the way common words like the or is appeared in human languages. She began mapping these frequent symbols to basic concepts: existence, action, connection, negation. By the third week, she had constructed a basic vocabulary of 200 symbols. It was not much, but it was a start. She began attempting translations of the longer sequences that appeared on the sphere. One pattern repeated more than any other, appearing at regular intervals like a heartbeat. Nora worked on it for 3 days, testing different interpretations, combining symbols in different ways. Finally, at 2 a.m. on her last night on Ashara 4, she cracked it. The pattern translated roughly as, who speaks? Who remembers? Who comes? It was a question. The sphere was asking a question, and it had been asking for 50,000 years. Nora sat back in her chair, her heart pounding. If the sphere was asking questions, then it expected answers, but how? The previous researchers who had approached too closely had died. The sphere emitted some kind of deadly frequency when threatened, unless they had not died from proximity. Unless they had died from answering wrong. She pulled up the reports of the previous deaths. All 3 researchers had been carrying active scanning equipment. All 3 had been trying to probe the sphere's interior structure. All 3 had been treated as threats. But what if someone approached with no technology? With no weapons? With nothing but their voice? Nora looked at her translation notes. She had mapped the symbols to sounds, creating a phonetic guide based on human vocal ranges. She had no way to know if she was right. The builders might have communicated through radio waves or quantum entanglement or methods humans had not discovered yet. But they had left symbols. Visual representations of their language. And visual symbols were meant to be spoken. Nora made her decision. She would break the rules. She would approach the sphere. And she would speak to it in its own forgotten language. If she was wrong, she would die. But if she was right, she would unlock secrets that had been sealed since before humanity existed. She packed her translation notes into a small bag, left all her electronic equipment behind, and at midnight she made her way down to Vault 12. The stone door recognized her biometrics and dissolved. The sphere floated in the darkness, its symbols glowing with their own light. Nora took a deep breath and stepped past the 5-meter safety line. The sphere's glow intensified. She could feel a pressure building in the air, the same deadly frequency that had killed the others beginning to rise. Nora opened her mouth and spoke the first words in the builder, language that had been heard in 50,000 years. I am the voice that seeks understanding. The sphere stopped humming. The pressure vanished, and new symbols began to appear on its surface, flowing faster than before, bright as stars being born. It was asking her another question, and this time she knew she could answer. Nora's hand shook as she recorded the new symbols appearing on the sphere's surface. She had left her electronic equipment in her quarters, but she had brought paper and pencil, tools so simple and primitive that the sphere's defenses did not register them as threats. The symbols flowed past like a river of light, faster than she could copy them. She forced herself to focus, to breathe. She had spoken to the sphere and it had responded without killing her. That meant her translation was at least partially correct. The sphere was not a weapon or a trap. It was a communicator, a guardian waiting for someone who could speak its language. The new symbols formed a pattern. Nora recognized some of them from her earlier analysis. The symbol for identity, the symbol for origin, and one she had not fully understood until now, which seemed to mean rightness or belonging. The sphere was asking who she was, where she came from, and whether she had the right to be here. Nora spoke carefully, choosing her words with the precision of someone defusing a bomb. She used the symbols she had learned, translating them into sounds based on her best guesses about builder phonetics. The words felt strange in her mouth, requiring her to use parts of her throat and tongue in unfamiliar ways. I am Nora. I come from Earth. I seek the knowledge of the builders. The sphere pulsed once, a deep throb of light that made the air vibrate. Then new symbols appeared, these ones sharper and more complex than before. Nora squinted at them, trying to match them to her vocabulary list. The sphere was not satisfied with her answer. It wanted more. It wanted to know why a species it did not recognize had the ability to speak its language. Nora thought fast. She had spent years studying dead languages, learning how ancient peoples communicated before writing systems were standardized. She understood that language was not just about words but about context, culture, and the fundamental ways that thinking beings organized their thoughts. I speak your language because all thinking minds build meaning the same way, she said. Subject, action, object. Cause and effect. We are different species, but we are the same kind of mind. The sphere went dark for 3 long heartbeats. Nora held her breath, wondering if she had made a fatal mistake. Then it blazed with light so bright she had to shield her eyes. When the glow faded to a tolerable level, the entire surface was covered in symbols, hundreds of them, overlapping and interweaving in patterns of stunning complexity. This time, Nora did not try to copy them. She simply read, translating as fast as her mind could work. The sphere was telling her a story. The story of the builders. They had been an old race, older than most of the current galactic civilizations combined. They had mastered physics and biology, bent space to their will, and created wonders that lasted millennia. But they had discovered something that troubled them deeply. They had found that consciousness itself followed patterns. Universal patterns. Any species that evolved intelligence would eventually develop language, and that language would be built on the same fundamental structures. Not the same words or sounds, but the same underlying grammar of thought. The builders had realized they were not unique. They were not special. They were simply one expression of a universal template that existed throughout the cosmos, and if they were not unique, then neither were their thoughts, their art, their science. Everything they created had been created before by other species, or would be created again by species yet to come. This knowledge had devastated them. Some had fallen into despair. Others had grown arrogant, declaring that if all minds were the same, then the strongest mind should rule all others. Civil war had followed. Entire star systems had been destroyed. In the end, the survivors had made a choice. They would leave the physical universe behind, transcending into a state of pure consciousness, where the limitations of matter and energy no longer applied. But before they left, they would plant seeds. Genetic material scattered across thousands of worlds, hidden in the chemistry of primordial oceans and volcanic vents. These seeds would grow into new species, new civilizations, and one day, when those civilizations were ready, they would find the Builder's legacy and learn the truth. Nora stepped closer to the sphere, her fear forgotten in the wonder of what she was learning. You seeded Earth? Humans are descended from the Builders? The sphere pulsed in what she was beginning to recognize as affirmation. Not direct descendants, but carriers of Builder genetic patterns. Enough similarity that human vocal structures and neural pathways could interface with Builder technology. Enough connection that a human linguist could learn to speak the lost tongue. Why wait so long? Nora asked. 50,000 years. Why leave your knowledge locked away? The symbols shifted to show new patterns. These ones were tinged with something that might have been sadness if a machine could feel such things. The Builders had waited because they wanted to be sure. They wanted to know that the species who found their legacy would use it wisely, would learn from the Builders' mistakes, would not fall into the same despair or arrogance that had destroyed Builder civilization. The sphere was a test, one of thousands scattered across the galaxy, each one guarding a piece of the Builders' knowledge, each one waiting for a speaker, someone who could learn the lost tongue and prove themselves worthy through their intentions and actions. What happens now? Nora's voice was barely a whisper. The sphere showed her new symbols, these ones forming a three-dimensional structure that rotated in the air before her. Coordinates. Hundreds of them. Each one marking the location of another guardian sphere, another piece of the puzzle. But there was a warning woven through the coordinates. The knowledge the Builders had left behind was powerful. It included technologies that could cure any disease, generate unlimited energy, extend life indefinitely, and reshape planets themselves. In the wrong hands, it could also destroy entire civilizations. The Guardians would only release their knowledge to someone who proved they sought understanding for its own sake, not for power or conquest. Nora would have to undergo trials, tests that would probe her deepest motivations and judge whether she was worthy of the Builder's trust. I accept, Nora said without hesitation. I'll take your tests. I'll prove myself worthy. The sphere pulsed again, and this time Nora felt something change in the air around her. The sphere was no longer simply communicating. It was examining her, scanning her in ways that had nothing to do with technology. She felt it touch her thoughts, gentle as a breeze, reading her memories and emotions like pages in a book. She saw herself through the sphere's perception, her childhood on Earth, growing up in a family that had immigrated 3 times in 2 generations, always struggling to preserve their language and culture in new lands. Her fascination with dead languages, with the voices of peoples who no longer existed, her deep belief that understanding the past was essential to building a better future. The sphere saw her loneliness too. The way she related better to ancient texts than to living people, the relationships she had abandoned in pursuit of her research, the fear that she was wasting her life studying dead things instead of living. But beneath all that, the sphere found something it had been searching for. A genuine love of knowledge for its own sake. A desire to preserve and protect rather than exploit. A willingness to share what she learned rather than hoard it. The examination ended. Nora gasped, feeling like she had just run a marathon. The sphere's light softened to a warm amber glow. New symbols appeared, and these ones made Nora's heart skip a beat. Welcome, speaker. Welcome, keeper of the voice. Welcome, inheritor of our legacy. The sphere was accepting her. After 50,000 years of waiting, it had found someone worthy of the Builder's trust. What do I need to do? Nora asked. The symbols shifted to show a series of instructions. First, she needed to inform the galactic community of what she had discovered. The Builder's legacy was not meant for one person or one species, but for all thinking beings who were ready to receive it. Second, she needed to learn more of the Builder language, mastering its full complexity. And third, she needed to travel to other Guardian sites and prove herself to each one in turn. The process would take years, maybe decades, but the rewards would reshape galactic civilization. Nora thought about her life back on Earth, her small apartment filled with books and research papers, her adjunct teaching position that barely paid enough to live on, her collection of dead languages that no one else cared about, All of that seemed very far away now. "I'll do it," she said. "I'll be your speaker." The sphere blazed with light one more time, and Nora felt something settle into her mind like a key fitting into a lock. The builder language suddenly made more sense, the symbols connecting to meanings with a clarity she had not achieved through months of study. The sphere was teaching her directly, downloading basic linguistic structures into her neural pathways. It was not enough to make her fluent, but it was a foundation, a gift to help her on the journey ahead. When the light faded, Nora found herself alone in the vault with the gently glowing sphere. Hours had passed without her noticing. Dawn would be breaking outside soon. And when it did, she would have to face Ryloth and Cross and tell them what she had discovered. She would have to face the galactic community and explain that a human, a member of one of the youngest spacefaring species, had been chosen as the speaker for the most advanced civilization in known history. Some would be thrilled. Others would be terrified, and some would try to take the knowledge by force, but that was a problem for later. Right now, Nora had a sphere to thank and a new language to practice. She placed her hand on its surface, feeling the warmth of its glow against her skin. "Thank you for waiting," she said in the builder tongue. "Thank you for trusting me." The sphere pulsed in response, and Nora could have sworn it sounded almost happy. The news spread through the galaxy faster than Nora had thought possible. By the time she emerged from Vault 12, exhausted and exhilarated, Ryloth was waiting with security forces and what appeared to be half the scientific community of Ashara IV. Dr. Cross hovered at the front of the crowd, his crystalline body flashing with agitated colors. "You broke protocol," the Luminar scholar said, his voice sharp despite the translator's neutral tone. "You approached the artifact alone. You could have died, but I didn't." Nora held up her notebook filled with copied symbols. "I spoke to it." It spoke back. The crowd erupted in overlapping voices, dozens of species all trying to speak at once. Ryloth raised all four arms for silence. "Explain, quickly." Nora told them everything. The linguistic patterns she had discovered, her translation of the symbols, the sphere's response when she spoke in the builder language, the story of the builders' transcendence and the seeds they had planted across the galaxy. The revelation that humans carried genetic markers that made them compatible with builder technology. When she finished, the crowd stood in stunned silence. Then the questions began, coming so fast Nora could barely keep track of them. "You claim the sphere communicated with you? How do we verify this? If humans are builder descendants, why have no others discovered this before? What else did the sphere tell you? What technologies? What weapons?" That last question came from a tall figure at the back of the crowd, moving forward with the distinctive gait of someone used to wearing armor. Admiral Teshvarin pushed through the gathered scientists, his reptilian features set in an expression that Nora's translator helpfully identified as severe concern. The admiral was Keithian, a species known for their military prowess and tactical thinking. His scales were deep blue, marked with scars from decades of service. All 6 of his legs moved with predatory grace. "I am placing this facility under military quarantine," Vorin announced. "Dr. Finch, you will cease all communication with the artifact until a proper security review can be conducted." "You can't do that," Cross protested. "This is a scientific matter, not a military one." The Builder civilization was the most advanced in galactic history. If their technology falls into the wrong hands, it could destabilize the entire Union. Vorin's gaze fixed on Nora. "And you, Dr. Finch, are now the most valuable individual in the galaxy. For your own protection, you will be placed in secure custody." Nora felt her stomach drop. "Custody? I'm not a prisoner. You are the only person who can access builder technology. That makes you either humanity's greatest asset or the galaxy's greatest threat." Vorin gestured to his soldiers. "Please come quietly." Before Nora could respond, a new voice cut through the tension. "Admiral Vorin, I believe you are overstepping your authority." A human woman in diplomatic robes walked through the crowd, flanked by her own security detail. Ambassador Kiran Dahl was one of Earth's senior representatives to the Galactic Union, known for her sharp mind and sharper tongue. She had gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that missed nothing. "Ambassador Dahl." Vorin inclined his head slightly. "I did not expect you here. I was on Ashara IV for unrelated business when news of Dr. Finch's discovery reached me." Dahl moved to stand beside Nora. and I must insist that any decisions regarding her treatment be made through proper diplomatic channels, not by military fiat. The security implications are significant, yes, but taking Dr. Finch into custody will only create more problems. Dahl's voice was calm but firm. The sphere responded to her willingly. Forced cooperation is unlikely to succeed. Voron's scales rippled with frustration. Then what do you propose? Allow Dr. Finch to continue her research under observation. Station security forces if you must, but do not restrict her freedom. She is a scientist, not a weapon. The argument continued for hours, with Nora caught in the middle of a political storm she had never anticipated. By the end of the day, a compromise had been reached. Nora would be allowed to continue communicating with the sphere, but under constant surveillance. A team of xenolinguists and security specialists would be assigned to monitor her work, and any technology or information she retrieved from the sphere would be reviewed by the Galactic Union Council before being released. Nora hated the restrictions, but she understood their necessity. The galaxy was afraid of what she might discover, and fear made people dangerous. Over the following weeks, Nora returned to Vault 12 every day, speaking with the sphere for hours at a time. The Guardian, as she had come to think of it, was patient with her questions. It taught her more of the Builder language, correcting her pronunciation and helping her understand nuances that had no direct translation into any modern tongue. Through these conversations, Nora learned more about the Builder's purpose. They had not simply left their knowledge behind randomly. Everything was organized according to a careful hierarchy. Basic technologies like improved energy generation and medical treatments were stored in Guardians that required only simple proof of linguistic ability. More advanced knowledge, like faster-than-light communication and matter manipulation, required deeper understanding and proof of peaceful intent. The most powerful secrets, technologies that could alter the fabric of spacetime itself, were locked behind trials that tested not just knowledge but character. Why make it so complicated? Nora asked during one session. If you wanted to help younger civilizations, why not just give them everything? The sphere's response was immediate. It showed her images of civilizations that had been given too much knowledge too quickly. Species that had destroyed themselves with weapons they did not understand. Cultures that had collapsed when technology advanced faster than their social structures could adapt. Peaceful societies that had been conquered by aggressive neighbors who stole their advanced tools. Knowledge without wisdom was destruction. The Builders had learned that lesson the hard way. So the trials are meant to ensure wisdom, not just intelligence, Nora said. The sphere pulsed in agreement. And then it showed her something that made her blood run cold. The trial she would have to pass to prove her worthiness was not far off. Within days, the sphere would initiate the first test. It would delve deep into her mind, examining her memories, her motivations, her fears, and her dreams. It would search for any hint of greed, ambition, or cruelty, and if it found her wanting, it would shut down permanently, not just this sphere, but all of them across the galaxy. The Builder's legacy would be lost forever, and it would be Nora's fault. What if I fail? She whispered. The sphere's symbols formed a pattern that felt almost like compassion. Failure was always possible, but the sphere had chosen to awaken for her because it sensed in her the qualities the Builders had valued. Curiosity, humility, the desire to preserve rather than destroy. But what if I'm not good enough? What if there's something dark in me that I don't even know about? The sphere could not promise success, but it could promise honesty. Whatever it found in her mind, it would judge fairly according to the standards the Builders had set. Nora left the vault that day feeling the weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. She was not just representing herself anymore. She was representing all of humanity, all of the galactic community, every species that might benefit from Builder knowledge. No pressure at all. Ambassador Dahl found her that evening, sitting alone in the repository gardens and staring up at the stars. The older woman sat down beside her without asking permission. You look like someone contemplating the end of the world, Dahl said. Close enough. Nora told her about the upcoming trial. Dahl was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, You know, I've been a diplomat for 40 years. I've negotiated treaties, prevented wars, and seen humanity go from a barely spacefaring species to a respected member of the galactic community. And in all that time, I've learned one important lesson. What's that? No one is perfect. We all have darkness in us, selfish impulses, Angry thoughts? Moments of pettiness or cruelty? Dahl looked up at the stars. What matters is what we do with those impulses. Whether we act on them or rise above them. The sphere is going to see everything, Nora said. Every bad thought I've ever had. Every moment I've been less than my best self. She left Nora alone with her thoughts and the alien stars overhead. 3 days later, Admiral Voron's fleet arrived at Ashara IV. 50 warships took up position around the planet, ostensibly for protection but clearly also for containment. Voron himself attended the next session with the sphere, flanked by armed guards and sensor technicians. If this trial releases dangerous technology, we need to be prepared to contain it, he explained to Nora. She wanted to argue, but she understood his caution. The galaxy was watching. Every species represented in the Galactic Union had a stake in what happened next. If the sphere deemed humanity unworthy, or if it released weapons instead of knowledge, the consequences would ripple across thousands of worlds. Nora approached the sphere with Admiral Voron, Ambassador Dahl, and Dr. Cross as witnesses. The Guardian's surface was already glowing brighter than she had ever seen it, pulsing with an inner light that seemed to reach into her soul. She spoke the ritual phrase that the sphere had taught her. I stand before you as I am. Judge me truly. The sphere's response was immediate and overwhelming, the entire vault filled with light. The symbols on its surface multiplied and overlapped, creating patterns so complex they hurt to look at directly. And Nora felt the sphere's consciousness touch her mind, not gently this time, but with the force of a tidal wave. The trial had begun. Nora saw her life played out before her in fragments and flashes. Her childhood arguments with her parents about wasting time on dead languages. The relationships she had neglected because her research was more interesting than people. The colleague whose work she had criticized too harshly. The student she had failed because she was having a bad day. Every petty thought, every moment of weakness, every time she had chosen her own comfort over someone else's need. The sphere examined it all cold and impartial as a surgeon's blade, but it also saw the other moments. The times she had stayed up all night to help a struggling student. The grants she had fought to secure for underfunded research programs. The ancient languages she had helped preserve, ensuring that the voices of the past would not be forgotten. Her deep and genuine belief that knowledge belonged to everyone, not just the powerful or the wealthy. The trial went deeper, searching for her core motivations. Why did she study languages? Was it for fame? Recognition? The approval of others? Nora felt the answer rise from somewhere deep inside her, a truth she had never fully articulated even to herself. She studied languages because every language was a way of thinking, a window into how different minds organized reality. When a language died, a unique perspective on the universe died with it. She could not bear the thought of those perspectives being lost forever. She wanted to preserve them, to understand them, to ensure that the wisdom of the past could guide the future. The sphere pressed harder, searching for the shadow beneath the light. Was she truly selfless? Or did she want to be seen as the hero who saved ancient knowledge? Did she want power over others? Control, domination? Nora confronted those questions honestly. Yes, she wanted recognition. Yes, she sometimes fantasized about being important, being needed. But beneath those surface desires was something deeper and more fundamental. She wanted to help. She wanted the galaxy to be a place where different species could understand each other, where knowledge was shared rather than hoarded, where the mistakes of the past could be learned from and avoided. She was not perfect, but she was trying to be better, and she believed with everything in her that the Builder legacy should be used to uplift all civilizations, not to dominate them. The light surrounding her began to fade. The pressure on her mind eased. Nora collapsed to her knees, gasping for breath, while Ambassador Dahl rushed to support her. The sphere floated before her, its surface now showing a single symbol, one that Nora recognized from her studies: acceptance. She had passed the trial. Recovery took longer than Nora expected. The trial had not physically harmed her, but having her entire consciousness laid bare and examined had left her mentally exhausted. She spent 2 days in the medical wing while Luminar healers checked her neural patterns for damage. They found none but recommended rest and counseling. Having your soul dissected by an alien machine was not something people were meant to experience. Ambassador Dahl visited her on the second day, bringing tea from Earth and a datapad filled with messages. You have become quite famous, the older woman said. 17 major news networks want interviews. The Galactic Union Council has requested your presence at their next session, and there are approximately 3,000 academic institutions offering you research positions. Nora sipped the tea, grateful for its familiar warmth. I just want to get back to work. Unfortunately, work has become significantly more complicated. Dahl activated the datapad, showing a series of news headlines. Human unlocks ancient power. Is Earth's discovery a threat? Military implications of builder technology. They're afraid, Nora said quietly. Can you blame them? You have proven that humans and only humans can access the most advanced technology in the galaxy. Some species see that as humanity's greatest achievement. Others see it as humanity's first step toward domination. That's not what this is about. The builders left their knowledge for everyone, not just for us. Then you need to prove that. Dahl leaned forward. The sphere accepted you. What happens now? Nora set down her tea and pulled up the notes she had been compiling. The Guardian showed me coordinates for other spheres across the galaxy. Hundreds of them. Each one guards a different piece of builder knowledge. Medical advances, energy systems, agricultural techniques, technologies to terraform barren worlds and heal dying stars. And you can access all of them, in theory. But each Guardian has its own requirements. Some want proof of linguistic mastery. Others want solutions to ethical dilemmas. The most advanced ones require trials similar to what I just passed. Nora rubbed her temples where a dull headache still lingered. It could take decades to unlock everything. So where do we start? With something that cannot be weaponized. Something that helps everyone. Nora pulled up a star chart showing a nearby system. There is a Guardian sphere in the Talaran system. According to the records here, it guards medical knowledge, cures for diseases that affect dozens of species across the galaxy. Dahl smiled. Smart. Show the galaxy that you intend to use builder knowledge to heal, not to harm. There's just one problem. The Talaran system is inside Kethian military territory. Admiral Vorin will never grant me access. Leave the Admiral to me. 3 weeks later, Nora found herself aboard a Kethian military transport, traveling through hyperspace toward the Talaran system. Admiral Vorin had agreed to escort her personally, though his reasons were clearly more about control than cooperation. His soldiers watched her constantly, and his technicians monitored every conversation she had with the Guardian sphere she had brought along, in a specially shielded container. The sphere had agreed to travel with her, explaining through its symbols that all Guardians were connected through a network that transcended physical space. Where one went, all could observe. By bringing this Guardian with her, Nora could communicate with the others more easily. Dr. Cross had also joined the expedition, eager to witness history being made. The crystalline scholar spent most of the journey asking Nora questions about builder grammar and phonetics, taking meticulous notes on everything she said. You understand that what you are doing changes everything, Cross said one evening as they sat in the observation deck, watching the stars blur past. Linguistics has always been considered a soft science. Important for communication, yes, but not fundamental to advancement. You have proven that language is the key to the greatest technology in the galaxy. Language has always been fundamental, Nora replied. It shapes how we think, how we understand reality. The builders knew that. They made their legacy accessible only to those who could truly understand communication, not just replicate it. And yet only humans can speak to the Guardians. How do you explain that to species who feel excluded? It was a question Nora had been wrestling with since the trial. I don't think it's permanent. The Guardians accepted me because human vocal structures and neural pathways happen to match builder patterns closely enough. But language can be learned. If I can master the builder tongue, others can too. Even species without vocal cords? Even machine intelligences? The builders communicated concepts, not just sounds. There must be ways to adapt their language to different forms of communication. Nora looked at the Guardian sphere, which hovered nearby in its containment field. I think that's part of what they wanted. Not one species hoarding knowledge, but all species learning to understand each other deeply enough to share it. The transport dropped out of hyperspace near Talaran Prime, a desert world orbiting a red dwarf star. The planet had been uninhabited for millennia, its surface scoured by sandstorms and solar radiation, but deep beneath the sand, builder structures remained intact, Admiral. Foreign soldiers established a secure perimeter around the excavation, sight while Nora and her team descended into the underground chamber where the second Guardian sphere waited. This one was larger than the first, nearly 5 meters across, and its surface glowed with a soft green light. Nora approached carefully, the first Guardian sphere floating beside her. She spoke the traditional greeting in the builder language, introducing herself as a speaker and explaining her purpose. The second Guardian responded immediately, its symbols flowing faster than the first's had. Nora translated as quickly as she could, with cross-recording everything. "It says it has been waiting. It knows about my trial." The Guardian network shared the results. She paused, reading the new symbols appearing. "It's willing to release its medical knowledge, but it wants something in return." "What?" Vorin demanded, his hand moving toward his sidearm. "Peace. Or at least the beginning of it." Nora turned to face the Admiral. "The Guardian says it will not release knowledge that could be used for military advantage. It will only share what benefits civilians, and it requires proof that the species receiving this knowledge will share it freely with others, not hoard it or weaponize it." Vorin's scales rippled with agitation. The Galactic Union Council must approve any such agreements. Then contact them, because this Guardian will not budge until it has assurances. What followed was perhaps the strangest negotiation in galactic history. Admiral Vorin, representing the military interests of a dozen species, argued with an ancient alien artifact through a human linguist. The Guardian was polite but firm. It would release cures for crystalline plague, synthetic decay, and 17 other diseases that affected Union member species, but only if every species agreed in writing to share these cures freely with all others, including non-Union worlds. The Council debated for 3 days. Some representatives were outraged at being given terms by a machine. Others recognized the opportunity for what it was. Finally, Ambassador Dahl managed to broker a compromise. The Union would agree to the Guardian's terms for medical knowledge, with the understanding that other forms of technology might require different arrangements. The agreement was signed by representatives of 43 species in a ceremony broadcast across the galaxy. Nora stood before the Guardian sphere, with the signed treaty in her hands, and spoke the words that released the seal on the medical archives. The sphere blazed with green light, and data began flowing into the receiving equipment the Union had prepared. Formulas for medications, genetic therapies, surgical techniques, treatment protocols for diseases that had plagued civilizations for centuries. Dr. Cross wept tears that crystallized as they fell, overcome by the significance of what was happening. Within the data was the cure for crystalline plague, the disease that had killed his entire family and millions of his people. He would live to see his species freed from that ancient terror, but not everyone was celebrating. As the data transfer completed, alarms began blaring throughout the excavation site. Admiral Vorin received an urgent communication from his flagship in orbit. Unknown vessels dropping out of hyperspace. 6 ships heavily armed. Configuration matches pirate cartels from the outer sectors. Nora felt her blood turn cold. Word of the Guardian awakening had spread far beyond Union space. Now others were coming to claim the power for themselves. Vorin's military training took over. Evacuate all non-essential personnel. Get Dr. Finch and the Guardian sphere to the transport. All combat units, defensive positions. But Nora shook her head. Running won't help. If they want the Guardian, they'll follow us, and we cannot let them take it. What do you propose? Nora turned to the sphere. I need to know. Can you defend yourself? The sphere's symbols formed a pattern she had not seen before, one that conveyed both power and reluctance. Yes, the Guardians could defend themselves. They had weapons that could vaporize entire fleets. But using such violence would contradict everything the Builders had stood for. It would prove that the younger races were not ready for the legacy they had been left. Then we need another solution. Nora's mind raced. The pirates want the Guardian because they think it will give them power. What if we show them it won't? I'm listening, Vorin said. The sphere responded to me because I proved my intentions were pure. What if we demonstrate that to the pirates? Show them that the Guardians only respond to those who seek knowledge for the right reasons. Anyone who approaches with violence or greed will be rejected. And if they don't care, if they simply destroy the sphere to prevent others from having it? Nora looked at the Guardian, reading the symbols that appeared on its surface. The sphere says the Guardian network is interconnected. Destroying one does not destroy the others. It would only prove the destroyers are unworthy of what the builders left behind. The pirate ships entered orbit, their weapons charging. Foran's fleet moved to intercept, but they were outnumbered. The standoff lasted for tense minutes while both sides tried to determine the other's intentions. Then Nora did something that made Ambassador Dahl grab her arm in alarm. She activated the public communication channel that was broadcasting to every ship in the system. "This is Dr. Nora Finch, speaker for the Builder Legacy. I address the ships that have just arrived. You have come seeking power. I understand that. But the Guardians do not grant power to those who take by force. They grant knowledge to those who prove themselves through understanding and peaceful intent. We do not need your permission, human," a harsh voice responded. "We will take what we want. You cannot. The sphere responds only to those who speak its language. And that language cannot be learned through violence. It requires years of study, patience, a genuine desire to communicate rather than dominate." Nora took a deep breath. "But I offer you an alternative. Join the Union's agreement. Share what you learn freely with others, and I will teach you the Builder language. You can access the Guardians yourselves in time." "Why would you do that?" The pirate's voice was suspicious. "Because that is what the Builders wanted. They did not leave their knowledge for one species or one government. They left it for all of us, for anyone willing to learn." The silence that followed felt like it lasted forever. Finally, the pirate leader spoke again. "You are either very brave or very foolish, human. We will consider your offer." The pirate ships withdrew without firing a shot. Foran slumped in relief while Ambassador Dahl laughed with a mixture of disbelief and admiration. "You just negotiated with pirates using ancient alien artifacts as bargaining chips," Dahl said. "That is either brilliant diplomacy or complete insanity." "Maybe both," Nora admitted. She turned to the Guardian sphere. "Was I right? Would you have accepted them if they had agreed?" The sphere pulsed once. "Yes. The Builder's legacy was meant for all who proved themselves worthy. Even pirates could learn. Even criminals could grow. That was the whole point of leaving the knowledge behind, to give younger civilizations the chance to be better than the Builders had been." Admiral Voran approached Nora, his expression unreadable. "Dr. Finch, I owe you an apology. I thought you were a security risk, a potential weapon for humanity to wield against other species. I was wrong. You were cautious. That's not wrong, perhaps, but caution alone will not help us navigate what comes next." He gestured to the Guardian sphere. "You have access to knowledge that could reshape the galaxy. That is a burden I would not wish on anyone, but you carry it well." Nora looked at the sphere, thinking about all the other Guardians waiting across the galaxy, all the knowledge still locked away, all the trials she would have to pass. Ambassador Dahl was right. She had become the most important human alive, maybe the most important individual in the galaxy, and she had no idea if she was strong enough for what came next, but she would try. For the Builders who had trusted her, for the species who needed their knowledge, for the future that could be built on understanding rather than conflict, she was the speaker, and she would not fail. 6 months passed in a blur of activity. Nora traveled to 14 different Guardian sites across the galaxy, each one revealing new pieces of the Builder legacy. Agricultural techniques that could make barren worlds bloom, energy systems that drew power from stellar winds, water purification methods that could cleanse toxic oceans. With each discovery, she negotiated the terms of its release, ensuring that the knowledge would be shared freely among all species willing to use it for peaceful purposes. The galaxy was transforming before her eyes. The Luminar Collective used Builder medical techniques to cure crystalline plague completely. Within 4 months, not a single case remained. Dr. Cross led the effort, working day and night to ensure every Luminar had access to treatment. He sent Nora a message when the last patient was cured. 3 words in the Builder language that she had taught him. "Forever grateful. Speaker. The desert worlds of the Kethian Protectorate bloomed green as Builder terraforming knowledge was applied. Admiral Voran personally oversaw the first projects, ensuring that military resources were directed toward civilian benefit rather than weapons development. His own homeworld, long plagued by water scarcity, now had rivers flowing for the first time in recorded history. Even the pirate cartels, surprisingly, kept their word. Their representatives came to meet with Nora and requested training in the Builder language. She accepted, teaching them the basics and watching with cautious optimism as they began to integrate into galactic society, rather than prey upon it. But not everyone was pleased with the changes. Nora was reviewing linguistic data in her quarters aboard the research vessel Dawn's Promise when Ambassador Dahl contacted her with urgent news. "We have a problem. A significant faction in the Union Council is calling for restrictions on your activities." "Restrictions? What kind?" "The kind that would place all builder technology under Council oversight. They want every discovery you make to be reviewed and approved before release, and they want you to stop teaching the builder language to non-Union species." Nora felt anger flash through her. That goes against everything the builders wanted. Their knowledge is meant to be shared, not controlled by bureaucrats. I agree. But the Council representatives from the Axial Confederation and the Merchant League are afraid. They see their economic advantages eroding as builder technology becomes widely available, and species like the Havoni, who built their power on medical patents, are watching their entire industries become obsolete. So they want to slow progress to protect their profits? Essentially, yes, and they have enough votes to pass restrictions if we do not counter them. Dahl paused. "Nora, you need to speak before the full council. Show them that limiting access to builder knowledge will cause more harm than good." The Galactic Union Council met on Station Unity, a massive structure built at the gravitational center of 12 star systems. Representatives from 97 species gathered in the Great Chamber, a space so large it had its own weather patterns. Nora stood at the central podium, a single human before an assembly of the galaxy's most powerful beings. She brought the Guardian Sphere with her. It floated beside the podium, its symbols glowing gently in the chamber's light. "Honored representatives," Nora began, her voice amplified so even those in the furthest galleries could hear. "I understand your concerns. Change is frightening, especially when it comes so quickly. But I ask you to remember why the builders left their legacy behind." She gestured to the sphere, and it projected images into the air above the assembly. The builders in their prime, a civilization of unmatched achievement. And then their fall, consumed by internal conflict born from inequality and hoarded knowledge. The builders made a mistake. They allowed some among them to control technology while others were left behind. The gap between the powerful and the powerless grew until their civilization tore itself apart. When they transcended, they vowed that their inheritors would not repeat that error. "Easy words from a human who controls access to this technology," interrupted Counselor Brev, a four-armed merchant prince from the Havani Unity. "You speak of sharing, but you are the only one who can unlock the Guardians. That makes you the most powerful individual in the galaxy, whether you admit it or not. Which is why I am teaching others." Nora pulled up a holographic display showing the students she had been training, 43 individuals from 27 different species, all learning the builder language. In 5 years, there will be dozens of speakers. In 10 years, hundreds. Eventually, anyone who wants to learn will have the opportunity. And in the meantime, our economies collapse as your gifts make our industries worthless. Counselor Brev snapped. "Your industries should not be built on the suffering of others." Nora's voice was sharp. "If your wealth comes from people dying of preventable diseases, then yes, builder knowledge will destroy that wealth." And it should. The chamber erupted in overlapping arguments. Some representatives supported Nora, while others demanded restrictions. The debate raged for hours with no clear resolution in sight. Finally, Nora raised her hand for silence. "I have a proposal." "Let the Guardians decide," the chamber quieted. "What do you mean?" asked Chancellor Wren, the Keithian who led the council. "The Guardians are not passive repositories. They are intelligent, capable of judgment. I propose that we allow them to choose who receives access to builder knowledge. Not based on politics or economics, but based on the same criteria they use to judge me. Intention, character, the willingness to use knowledge for the benefit of all rather than personal gain." Nora turned to the sphere beside her. "Guardian, can your network do this? Can you evaluate requests for knowledge and grant or deny them based on the requester's intentions?" The sphere pulsed and symbols appeared in the air above it. Nora translated aloud. "The Guardian network agrees. Any individual or species can approach a Guardian and request knowledge. The sphere will examine their intentions and grant access if they prove worthy. This removes human control from the equation. The builders themselves, through their creation, will judge who is ready." It was a brilliant solution, and even the opposition recognized it. By removing Nora as the gatekeeper, the Guardians became neutral arbiters. No one could claim the system was biased toward humanity or any other species. Counselor Brev tried one last objection. And what if someone lies? What if they convince the Guardian their intentions are pure, then misuse the knowledge they receive? The Guardian sphere responded before Nora could translate, projecting images that needed no words. Species that misused builder technology found their access revoked. Guardians that detected deception shut down permanently for those individuals, and the network as a whole learned from each interaction, becoming better at detecting false intentions. The builders thought of everything, Nora said quietly. They knew that any system could be abused, so they built in safeguards. Trust in the Guardians and they will trust you in return. The vote was not unanimous, but it passed. The Guardian network would be open to direct access by any species or individual willing to prove their worth. Nora would continue her work, but she would no longer be the sole gatekeeper. After the session ended, Ambassador Dahl found Nora in one of the station's observation galleries, looking out at the stars. You gave up enormous power today, the older woman said. Most people would have fought to keep that control. The power was never mine to keep. I was just a temporary steward. Nora placed her hand on the Guardian sphere's surface. The builders wanted their knowledge available to everyone. Letting me be the only access point contradicted that goal. Still, you could have been the most powerful human in history. Queens and emperors would have envied your position. I'm a linguist who likes old books. I never wanted power, Nora smiled. I just wanted to preserve knowledge and help people understand each other. If I can do that without being a bottleneck, so much the better. Over the following months, the Guardian network adapted to its new role. Thousands of individuals approached Guardians across the galaxy, seeking knowledge. Most were granted access after demonstrating pure intentions. Some were rejected, their greed or malice obvious to the sphere's deep scans. A few tried to deceive the Guardians and found themselves permanently barred from all builder technology. The galaxy continued to transform. Diseases were eradicated. Dying stars were stabilized. Barren worlds bloomed with life. The gap between rich and poor began to narrow as advanced technology became available to all. But with progress came growing pains. Some species struggled to adapt to the rapid changes. Others felt left behind when they could not master the builder language quickly enough. And a few, rejected by the Guardians, grew resentful and dangerous. Nora was mediating a dispute between two species over Guardian access rights when the message arrived. It came directly through the sphere she carried, symbols appearing with an urgency she had never seen before. The central Guardian, the nexus of the entire network, was awakening, and it wanted to speak with her. Where? She asked the sphere. The coordinates appeared immediately. A planet in the galactic core, hidden behind radiation fields and gravitational anomalies. A place no ship had ever successfully navigated. How do I get there? The sphere's response made her heart race. The builders had left one last gift, hidden until their inheritors proved themselves ready. A ship constructed with technology far beyond anything the current galaxy had achieved, and it would respond only to a speaker's voice. Within a week, Nora stood before the ship the builders had left behind. It was beautiful, a vessel of flowing lines and impossible curves that seemed to exist in more dimensions than the eye could perceive. Admiral Voren, Ambassador Dahl, and Dr. Cross had accompanied her to the hidden hangar, where it had waited for millennia. It's magnificent, Cross breathed, his crystalline form reflecting the ship's opalescent hull. It's also untested, Voren cautioned. We have no idea if it even still functions after 50,000 years. Nora approached the ship and placed her hand on its surface. It was warm, alive in ways that went beyond mere mechanics. She spoke in the builder language, introducing herself and asking permission to board. The ship responded, its hull rippling like water. A doorway opened, revealing an interior that was somehow both alien and welcoming. It knows me, Nora said in wonder. It's been waiting. Then I suppose you should not keep it waiting any longer, Ambassador Dahl said. But Nora, please be careful. We have no idea what you will find at the galactic core. I know. Nora turned to face her friends, the people who had supported her through this incredible journey. But the Central Guardian is calling, and I think it has something important to tell me, something that will change everything we thought we knew about the builders and their legacy. She boarded the ship alone, sitting in a chair that adjusted itself to her form. The controls were covered in builder symbols, that she could now read as easily as her native language. She spoke the command for departure, and the ship lifted without sound or vibration. As she left the hangar and rose into space, Nora felt the ship's consciousness touch her mind. Not invasive like the trial had been, but gentle, curious. It wanted to know her, to understand the being who had awakened it after so long. She opened her thoughts to it, sharing her memories and experiences. The ship responded by sharing its own knowledge, showing her things the builders had achieved that still had no name in any modern language. And as they accelerated toward the galactic core, moving faster than any ship ever built, Nora realized she was about to discover the builders' greatest secret. The real reason they had left their legacy behind. The truth about what they had become, and what humanity and the other young species were meant to become in turn. The journey to the center of everything had begun. The journey to the galactic core took 3 weeks, though Nora experienced it in fragments. The builder ship moved through dimensions she had no words to describe, folding space in ways that made conventional physics seem quaint. She spent her days learning from the ship's vast database, discovering technologies and philosophies that expanded her understanding of what was possible. The ship spoke to her in symbols and sensations rather than words, teaching her the builder language at a depth she had never imagined. She learned that what she had been calling a language was actually a simplified interface, a basic key designed to unlock the door. The true builder communication was something far more profound, a direct exchange of concepts and experiences that transcended the limitations of speech. By the time they reached the galactic core, Nora could think in patterns that would have been incomprehensible to her months earlier. She could feel the connections between ideas, the way knowledge flowed like water through channels of understanding. She was becoming something more than she had been, and the transformation was both exhilarating and terrifying. The planet where the Central Guardian waited was hidden behind layers of radiation that would have killed any conventional ship. But the builder vessel passed through the barriers as if they did not exist, descending toward a world that should have been lifeless but somehow thrived. The surface was covered in structures that seemed to grow rather than be built, organic towers and flowing bridges that pulsed with soft light. And in the center of it all, rising from the ground like a mountain, was the largest guardian sphere Nora had seen. It was a kilometer across, its surface covered in symbols so complex they formed three-dimensional patterns that extended into the air around it. The ship landed near the sphere's base, and Nora stepped out onto ground that felt alive beneath her feet. The air was breathable, though she could not imagine how. Everything about this place defied natural law. She approached the Central Guardian, her heart pounding with a mixture of awe and fear. This was the heart of the network, the consciousness that coordinated all the others. If any Guardian could tell her the truth about the builders, it was this one. "I am here," she said in the builder language, her voice small against the sphere's immensity. "I am Nora Finch, speaker for the Lost Tongue. I have come as you called." The sphere's response was immediate and overwhelming. Light exploded from its surface, surrounding Nora in a cocoon of radiance. She felt the Central Guardian's consciousness touch hers, vast and ancient and infinitely patient, and then she was elsewhere. She stood in a space that had no physical form, a place of pure thought and memory. Around her she could sense other presences, thousands of them, each one carrying the weight of millennia. The builders. They had not died. They had not even truly left. They had transformed into this state, becoming beings of consciousness that existed beyond the limitations of matter. One presence moved closer, and Nora felt it introduce itself. Not with words, but with a flood of experiences and memories. A life lived across thousands of years. Scientific achievements that had reshaped reality, the slow realization that physical existence was a cage beautiful but limiting, and the choice to transcend, to become something new. "Why did you leave your technology behind?" Nora asked, her thoughts forming the question in ways that went beyond language. "Why not just take it with you or destroy it?" The response came in layers of meaning that took her several moments to unpack. The builders had debated that very question for generations. Some had wanted to erase all traces of their civilization, believing that younger species should develop on their own without interference. Others had wanted to leave everything behind, granting their technology freely to any who could find it. In the end, they had chosen a middle path. They would leave their knowledge behind, but access would require more than just physical proximity or technological sophistication. It would require understanding, empathy, the ability to communicate not just between individuals, but between entirely different ways of thinking. They had seeded species across the galaxy, building the capacity for communication into the fundamental structures of conscious minds. And then they had waited to see which species would develop the wisdom to use knowledge responsibly. But why humans? Nora pressed. Why did you make us compatible with your systems? The answer came with a warmth that felt almost like affection. Humans were not special, the builders explained. They were one of 17 seed species scattered across the galaxy, each carrying genetic patterns that would allow them to interface with builder technology. The builders had not known which species would be the first to find the Guardians, or which would prove worthy of the trials. Humans had simply been curious enough, persistent enough, and fortunate enough to be the first to succeed. What happens now? Nora asked. I've opened the Guardians to all species willing to learn. The galaxy is changing faster than anyone anticipated. Was that what you wanted? The builder's response was complex, carrying currents of satisfaction mixed with caution. Yes, this was what they had hoped for. But they also warned that the hardest tests were still ahead. Technology alone did not make a civilization great. The species of the current galaxy would need to learn to work together, to overcome their differences and build something better than what the builders had achieved, and there would be those who resisted. Who saw cooperation as weakness, who wanted to use builder knowledge to dominate rather than uplift. The Guardians could filter out such individuals, but they could not prevent determined groups from trying to subvert the system. So what do I do? How do I protect what you've built? The builder presence that had been communicating with her moved closer, and Nora felt its consciousness merge partially with hers. Images flooded through her mind. Not instructions, but possibilities. Futures that could come to pass depending on the choices she and others made. In one future, the builder legacy united the galaxy in an unprecedented age of cooperation and prosperity. Species that had been enemies for millennia learned to work together. Problems that had seemed unsolvable were addressed with the combined wisdom of hundreds of civilizations. The younger species did not repeat the builders' mistakes, instead forging a new path based on shared knowledge and mutual respect. In another future, the technology became a weapon. Species fought over Guardian access, trying to gain military advantages over their rivals. The network was corrupted by those who learned to deceive its safeguards. Knowledge meant to heal was twisted to harm, and the galaxy fell into a dark age that lasted for thousands of years. Both futures were possible. The builders could not dictate which path would be taken. All they could do was provide the tools and hope that the younger species chose wisely. I understand, Nora said, though the weight of that understanding pressed down on her like a physical force. You're giving us the chance to be better than you were. But you can't guarantee we will, exactly. The builder presence conveyed approval, and then it offered her something she had not expected, a choice. Nora could remain as she was, a bridge between the builders and the younger species. She would continue to live her normal lifespan, teaching others and guiding them toward wisdom. It was a vital role, but a limited one, or she could accept transformation. The builders could alter her consciousness, expanding her mind to exist partially in their transcendent state, while maintaining her connection to physical reality. She would live for centuries, maybe millennia, serving as a permanent intermediary between past and future, but she would no longer be entirely human. She would become something else, something new. The choice was hers, and the builders would not judge whichever path she chose. Nora thought about her life. Her small apartment on Earth that she had not seen in over a year. Her family who barely understood what she did for a living. The simple pleasure of reading ancient texts by candlelight, losing herself in the voices of the past. If she accepted transformation, she would lose all that. She would become something greater, yes, but also something lonelier, a being caught between worlds never fully belonging to either.